Hi everyone, it's Philip here. How you getting on? I can see that perhaps a few of you need a haircut by now. You'll be pleased to have learned that in the more recent releases about what level 2 will look like, and hopefully that's going to happen next week. You'll be able to get a haircut. Go to the barber, go to the hairdresser, get yourself sorted out. I was fortunate to have had my haircut on the Saturday before lockdown, so I've kind of got by okay. I encouraged my son Oliver to go as well. He was already pretty woolly then, and he refused me. And well, with a few weeks of lockdown, he looked like a woolly mammoth. He looked terrible. No, he didn't look terrible. He looked kind of funny, but clearly the whole thing was getting well out of control. So this week, actually, Rebecca decided to offer to cut his hair, which he accepted, and she did a fantastic job, I have to say. Having, as far as I know, never cut hair before. Really, really good job, and using embroidery scissors or something, just sort of, the blades were only about that long. Yeah, looked really good. So it'll be nice, won't it? It'll be nice to be able to get out there and have a few of these things, which, could you imagine going 6 months like this? Anyway. So that's cool. I wonder though, I know some of you are probably in need of a haircut, and I think there are some people who do get their haircuts at home. I've heard some stories, and I've got a bit of pushback from sharing too many of the stories that I've heard via the vlog. Perhaps we feel a little exposed when things shared end up being things blared. So I won't say who, but yeah, I've heard of a few families that perhaps either do it regularly or certainly have done it before. But I know of one, at least I can think of, that has ventured into it more out of necessity rather than desire or any kind of habit. So perhaps opening up to some hairdressing salons next week will be a bit of a blessing for many. But it got me thinking, how would you measure when you need a haircut? How do you measure that? For me, there's a couple. One is, just sort of tidiness around the ears. It can overgrow the ears a bit and look a bit funny. And there's only so long that you can sweep that back. And the other part is just when it gets too heavy on the top and the product doesn't hold it right. That's the obvious sign. But there's lots of ways that you could measure it. For some people, it's a kind of a cost-benefit thing. How long can I avoid going to the hairdresser? A barber might be cheaper, but it's still costing money. Some people are kind of just, money-wired, and they'd rather not spend money on their haircut if they could avoid it. For some, I think, they're perhaps more women than men, but maybe that's changing. They're looking at the colour and thinking, oh, there's a few greys there. Time to get that washed out. Length, split ends, all sorts of things, right? Some people are just literally, it's a time-based thing. I just get their haircut every 6 weeks regardless. So we all have our different ways of measuring things. What they all have in common is that we have some way of valuing the measurement that we use is a way of valuing the cut and what we get out of the haircut, if it's just purely a practical thing or if it's got more to do with how we feel about how we look. But we all have a way of measuring it, and that measure suggests intent and design and care. So that brings me to Revelation 11, and I was tempted to share this a little bit in my previous vlog, but the time ran out, so probably not a bad thing that I kept it for now. It's Revelation 11, 1 and 2, just a couple of verses where John is encouraged told to take a measuring reed and measure out the temple, and then told, but don't worry about the outer court because that's been handed to the nations and it will be trampled for a period of time. And there's a couple of things here. One, of course, is already we've got a reference to Ezekiel. He's already been referred to in the way that John's prophecy and his prophetic calling mirrored Ezekiel's, and the images of the throne room have similarities. So we've already mentioned that a little bit. But also Jesus says something about measuring and preparing things that I want to get to. So firstly, Ezekiel. When Ezekiel's told in his prophetic vision to measure the temple and all these kinds of things, the purpose of that isn't because God is really keen that Ezekiel become an architect. The purpose is that through this process, God is saying to Ezekiel, and therefore to the people of God, the Jews who are at this time in Babylon, held in captivity, that there is a future for them as a nation, as a worshipping people, that God has a plan in place to rebuild the temple, which means that the people will be back in their land and that they will be free to worship again. And they will no longer be in isolation and lockdown, held against their will by another government, but they'll be free to do what they want to do, to worship freely. So that's the purpose, really, in a sense, of, or at least one of the purposes of that vision. And later, further down the track, we get to John 14, and Jesus is encouraging his disciples just before his great moment of his crucifixion and resurrection. He's saying, "Don't be afraid. I go ahead to prepare a place for you. My Father's house has many rooms, and I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And because I say that, you know that I'm going to come back and get you." So, of course, he's going to leave them for a period of time, not just through the crucifixion, but of course then the ascension. When Jesus returns to the Father's place, if you like. It'd be easy for them as disciples to lose heart and think that God had forgotten them. But what Jesus was saying very clearly was he hadn't forgotten them, and was in fact expanding this vision that if Ezekiel's vision and hope was the people will return home to this place called Israel and that land that they call home, and they will be able to freely worship. The expansive nature of Jesus' vision is, it's not just this spit of land that matters. It is something far bigger than that. God's home has many rooms. And the vision we've already seen in Revelation isn't just of Jews going to heaven, but in fact the true Jew is anyone who is any of God's people. And they come from every nation, tribe, and tongue, and so on. So the vision is much bigger. The space needed is much bigger. It's expansive. So it's an expansive vision that Jesus sets forward, not just a geographical one, but a real hope of a much better place. But also because of the measurement of it, or at least the sense of intent when he says, "I go to prepare a place for you," Jesus is telling them that nothing's going to be left out, that they will not be overlooked, nothing will be forgotten, that the sense of preparation and getting things ready is intended to build hope and faith and to encourage, right? To fill the heart with some longings, some good longings, so that they would hold on through the hard times. Now, John is told to, as I said, measure the temple, but not the outer court. Now, in a way, he's caught between the hope of Ezekiel that there will be a place here on earth where we'll freely worship God, but the tension that really the picture that we've been encouraged to long for is not a temple here on earth, but God's kingdom on earth. God's kingdom, where Jesus rules and reigns over all things, and all evil has been defeated, and there is no more tears and no more suffering and so on. That's the thing we're longing for. But the church, which is post the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the ascension of Jesus Christ, and waiting for his return, is caught now between two spaces. We have our place to worship freely. Certainly we do here in New Zealand, but we can worship God. But in doing so, we are worshipping in contested space. That we are to live as though we are members of God's kingdom while living in the world's kingdom. That creates a tension. So that's where the measurement of the temple versus the trampled outer court comes in. The temple, of course, is us, right? We are the temple. In Revelation it says that the people of God are the temple, are pillars in God's temple. And elsewhere in the New Testament, of course, the temple of God is the people in whom the Holy Spirit dwells. So it's not a building. It's a metaphor for us, a people. And the outer court, well, that's kind of like, in a sense, really the rest of the world. And so here we are placed as a people of God amongst the world, and we might like to extract ourselves from that, but our calling is to be faithful and faithful witnesses to the world, and we'll get to that more in another vlog. But here we are caught in this place between, and that creates tension, that creates difficulties. For instance, right? Imagine again, the temple is a building. Here we are, we within the building, within the temple, we are able to worship God. But the outer walls of that building are being spray painted by graffiti artists, tagged by little punks straight outside those walls. While we're worshipping God, others are worshipping rugby or worshipping the economy or worshipping science or whatever it is. That if they're not worshipping it, at least they're just doing whatever they want. They're having they're having fun while we're inside worshipping, as many would imagine it, right? That's what they think, that going to church is the boring, hard thing, and or at least being a church is the hardship, and God is a killjoy, not letting us have any fun in the world. So that's the tension. Now, in John's day, the tension was made palpable by these kinds of things. That if you had chosen Jesus Christ, that could mean loss of your job. It could mean loss of your possessions, your home, your status. It could mean loss of freedom if you were jailed for your faith. It could mean loss of life. So there were some significant things you would lose, very real, tangible things. None of that threatens us in New Zealand. No one's going to lose their life because they were a Christian in an anti-Christian, a government which was anti-Christian and had a heart or a will to kill Christians for their faith. The opposite, in fact. Last year we had police coming to us, just making sure that we felt safe in the community related to a particular nasty event, horrible event in Christchurch. And they went to all the worshipping centres and just made sure that we knew that they knew that they were on our side, that they would do what they could to support and protect us. So that's the nature of faith in New Zealand. You can believe anything here, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. You're allowed to hold your faith and be true to your convictions in that sense, provided you don't break the laws. But then the government's laws aren't intended to make that difficult. Not really. So it's not that we don't live in that same contested space, but it's not like we don't live in contested space. And I think our challenge is different. And again, it's kind of seen perhaps by the contrast of the two cultures. When John was writing to his churches, what they had done in becoming Christians was swap allegiances. Their world was full of gods and deities. There was almost no way you could escape the understanding that the world hummed by the will and wishes of many gods, and you did what you could to live in harmony with them. And the Christians swapped allegiance with all of those gods for this one God. It was hard to be an atheist, really, in that age, because the accepted reality was the spiritual one. The irony, of course, is that the Christians themselves were considered the first atheists in a sense, because they didn't have a temple as a building. They didn't have an altar that they sacrificed anything to. They didn't have a clear kind of line of priests or anything. What instead they had was this regular gathering around a meal. It was more like an extended family gathering than it was some sort of religious service. And so they were almost considered atheists, and many called them that. So that's quite an irony considering the situation we face ourselves now. So in changing so what they did, their thing was to swap allegiance, and that caused their problems. For us, the outer court surrounding the church, surrounding the faithful, is a court trampled with many paths, many opportunities, many alternatives, many other ways. It's like ground just covered in tracks and paths, seeking different ways of living and different alternatives and opportunities that you could explore. It is a world of opportunity. There are no gods that you need to be loyal to, no allegiance to any great thing that you are asked to. It is a very consumerist kind of worldview where you are to pick and choose of the many alternatives available, what seems to make best sense to you and the way that you want to live your life. That's what's on offer outside the temple of God. So you can choose the career that you want, you can choose the cause that you want, you can choose the savings scheme that you want, you can choose whether you want to live a life of great travel, to fill your life with memories of traveling around the world, or whether you want to save your money and spend it on a nice home and a holiday place, a holiday house, or perhaps you just want the nice launch, or you want a really amazing retirement. Whatever it is, there's just a smorgasbord of options, a pick and mix of options, so that you can kind of tailor your own life depending on what you want and what you value. You don't have to be loyal, though, to anything other than what you want. That, of course, is a loyalty in itself, to suggest that the only real loyalty is loyalty to yourself. That's a loyalty claim, anyway. What then is unique about Christianity in our age isn't that we're swapping allegiance, but in fact that we are daring to have one. And that's not as easy as it sounds. Not at all. A couple of quotes that I'd like to share. One from a chap called Ants. They called him Ants, short for Anthony, and based out of Christchurch. And we went down, a couple of us, 2 years ago to a community hui in Christchurch, and they were encouraging, or at least exploring, this idea of Christian community at a sort of a deeper level. And Ants made this comment. He said, when you become a Christian, that's kind of like your last decision, right? Your decision is, I'm going to follow Christ. Everything from there on is discernment. That at that point, Christ is your King and your Lord, and you ask Him how you are to live, and how are you to spend your time, and who are you to spend that time with, and what are you supposed to do with your money, and what is your energy for? The rest of it is discernment. No more decisions, right? Of course, there's decisions to be made within discernment, but you get his point. The other one is from a dear friend and mentor, Rex Meehan, whom I really miss these days. He used to say, thinking of the church in New Zealand, he said, for most people, Jesus Christ is just the minister of their religion, not the Lord of their life. And this really struck me, and he said it a couple of times, but he really only needed to say it once to hit it home, because it's incredibly true that there's a degree of importance placed on the gathering of the Sunday morning at the cost of what we're supposed to do Monday morning, and that the call to faith, to allegiance to a God, is to say that it's supposed to stain every decision we make. The Holy Ghost is meant to haunt us at every turning point in our life, not just whether we go to church on Sunday or not. And that is a very difficult thing to do in a world absolutely brimming with opportunities and ways in fact, that encourages us to not hand over our future to some other deity other than to make a call for what suits us best, and to pick and mix and tailor our own lives according to the options available. That to make an allegiance, to set aside, to be loyal to something, to cost and to exclusivity, is itself seen as a horrible thing to do in this age, and extremely hard to hold on to. And for me, often actually the purchase decision is often a place to look if you want to know where your allegiance lies. Money actually, it kind of does have a character, but its main purpose really is to ask of your heart, what do you want? And then to amplify it. Money is an amplification power. So it takes what we want and it just amplifies it. So look how you spend your money. Look how much money you put into insurance, health insurance, life insurance, house insurance. Look how much money you put into savings and what you plan to do for your retirement. Look how much money you've got invested in investments and in homes, or in your own house. Look how much money you set aside to spend on the extras that you want in your life. Look how much money you set aside to give away, whether to a church or to other organizations. Invariably, how we spend our money or don't spend our money, right? That's just as much an indicator. Will determine, or at least be a reflection of where our heart's at. I remember a story of someone who was challenged. They had an extra property, and they were challenged, convicted maybe, that they should sell that property, that it wasn't something that they needed, and the fact that the money tied up in it and their time tied up in it could be better used elsewhere. And they were talked out of that conviction by loved ones around them who didn't want to lose that in their life because they too benefited from it. Now that might have been the right advice to be given, but it seems to be very easy to take that advice and very, very hard to follow the conviction that might cost us something in this world. because we are genuinely caught between two worlds. We're caught between our desires for the things in this life, which are not evil in themselves at all, and caught between this hope that Jesus said that he's preparing a place for us, which means that this place isn't for us, right? It means that this place, we're not supposed to be preparing our place for ourselves here. That if we're to trust Jesus and make him our Lord, not just the minister of our religion so we can get on and live our lives as we please elsewhere, we're going to be asking him these very profound questions. Lord, what do I do with this money? Lord, I've got this spare time. What should I do with it? Lord, should I be in this career? Should I be doing this job? Should I be giving this much time and energy to it? What else should I be doing? That we should become discerning people. That even as John was told to measure out the temple and know that the world outside of that temple was to be left to the nations, that we should be carefully measuring our lives as well, asking the Lord to measure us, not only as a church, but as members of that church, pillars in that church, and asking, are we fit? And how do we fit? What do we fit best? Excuse me. Anyway, I'll leave that with you. I'm about to cough. So I hope to see you soon. God bless you, and thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and put any comments in. I'd love to know what you've got to share. Cheers.